guys, welcome back to Rock Your Comeback podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Eaton, and today we're diving into something we all experience, stress,
Yeah.
but probably in a way you've never heard about it before. So, my guest, Dr. Gary Sprouse, also known as Less Stress Doc, spent nearly 4 decades as a primary care physician before dedicating his work to helping people find true happiness through humor, compassion, and understanding. I'm so excited to have you because I know that every single person listening is like, help me with my
I
stress.
right. This is what I get every time I tell people I wrote this book. They're like, "Oh, I need that book." And I'm like, "Well, get it." It's like it's not going to get into your head without reading it, right? So,
Now, you spent 4 decades as a primary care doctor,
yes.
working with, I would assume, the body. How do we go from working with the body to working with more of the mind? And where did you see that crossover between stress and the physical body?
Yeah, well, I've read studies that say that sort of like, I don't know, 60, 70, 80% of things that go on in people actually is related to your mind. So as a primary care doctor, you're spending a whole lot of time dealing with people's stresses, their psychological issues, because they affect the body, right? So like people who came in with high blood pressure, a lot of times it's because they were stressed out. And it's like, if I just dealt with their blood pressure and didn't deal with the stressed out part, then I wasn't being very effective. And so I learned early on in my career that you had to handle mental health issues as a primary care doctor because that's half the reason why people were there. As my career went on, I found that stress was a bigger topic, and I started doing some more research into stress and where it comes from. And most of the books I read about stress were two kinds. One, like here's the list of the top 10 stresses, and here's some generic thing you can do to make it less. Or just some specific treatment like, okay, meditate or exercise or do Zen or, go to church or whatever. But I'm like, there's something missing because, there's like 100,000 books out there on how to have less stress, and people are getting worse, not better. So what's missing, right? So as I was doing my research as a physician, I came and said, "Hey, here's a prescription for your blood pressure, and it works great, but it could have some side effects. And so we're going to do everything we can to maximize the benefits and minimize the side effects." But when I took that concept of benefits and side effects and I put it onto a human mind, I was like, "Whoa, wait a second. The majority of human stresses are just side effects to how our mind works." So what that means is I can envision a future. And that's like, what a great, incredible skill. But then the side effect is then I have to worry about it. So if you're a human and you can't envision a future, like my 1-year-old grandson, he doesn't sit at the breakfast table and go, "Dad, how are we going to pay for college?" Because he doesn't have the skill of being able to envision the future. So he just lives for today, which is what psychologists tell us to do. But what you find is he needs his parents to take care of him because living for today doesn't work when you're in a human environment. So what I've tried to do in the book then is say, hey, let's keep the skill of envisioning the future and let's get rid of the side effect of worrying about it.
Right? We have this power of the mind where we can create anything. Why do you think it is that we tend to create the negative scenarios? What is that about? Because we
Yeah,
all do
well,
it.
yeah. So it turns out that humans are actually designed to look for the bad things. So if
Mhm.
you're out as a hunter gatherer, right, in ancient times, and you're looking for some berries, and you find 10 bushes with berries in it, but there's a saber-toothed tiger behind one of the bushes, yeah, you're going to pay attention to the saber-toothed tiger because it doesn't matter how many berries you find. If you miss the saber-toothed tiger, you're not going to eat the berries. So we are actually literally designed to look for the dangerous things in our environment. Okay, but here's the key. So if you don't have future, then your environment is just where you're at. And what happens to humans in this day and age is that our environment isn't just like in your office or in your library. It's the whole United States, it's the whole earth because we have access to, I probably know more about what's going on in Ukraine than people in Ukraine do because and not only is it the Earth, it's actually the universe because all our movies are about aliens coming in and taking us over, or some virus or some asteroid that's going to crash. And then, oh, wait, that's right, we have future. So now you're trying to keep your whole Earth, your whole universe, and all the future safe. And you're like, you're looking for all the dangerous things that can happen. Well, that can get pretty overwhelming.
Yeah. I think that a lot of clients I come in contact with really have that issue, right? Is they're looking at their future and they're projecting out to their future And it is so many things that we can't control. And logically, they know that. So I think we're battling with this big issue, right? We logically know that we don't need to worry about, the earth, the sun burning out, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah, there you go. That's a good example.
Log- we logically know that, but we still do it. How are we able to redirect our energy when we find ourselves almost, I feel like it's almost automatic that people have that experience.
It is. It's a habit. It's automatic. It's ingrained into us. And then people foster it because, a lot of people think that worrying is actually helping them. Like
Yeah.
it shows that they're putting energy into solving the problem. When really, in fact, it doesn't really help very much at all. It just kind of drains your energy. So the first thing that I found was when I would say, like, I had a lady came to me and said, Dr. Sprouse, I worry that I worry too much. And I'm like, yeah, then you probably do, right? So I was like, but tell
Yeah.
me what worry is. And so when she tried to define it, she got all stumbly and like, yeah, she thought she knew what it felt like. She knew how to use it in a sentence. But when she actually tried to define it, it got really tricky. And I was like, well, if you can't define it, well, then how are you going to fix it? Right. So the first thing that I had to do was to define what worry is. So here's my definition. So it's using this incredible skill of being able to envision the future, focusing on all the bad things that can happen. And then, and this is the key, is having a fear reaction right now. So the problem is the fear reaction is to a concept, it's to an idea. It's a real thing. I mean, it's to us, it's kind of real, right? Like there could be a saber-toothed tiger back there. Who knows, right? And then you go, oh, but if there was a saber-toothed tiger, what would I do, right? When you see that as your definition, you're like, okay, well then here, what can I do about that? So the first thing is be grateful that you have the ability to envision the future. My 1-year-old grandson doesn't. I used to do a lot of nursing home work, and I had patients that had dementia, and they had lost that skill, so they can no longer look into the future. So be grateful that you have this amazing skill. The second then is you have a choice. You can to choose to pick and focus on all the bad things that can happen, or you can choose to pick and look at all the good things that could happen. So I use this term called realistic optimism. So what that means is I'm going to choose to focus on the good things. So as an example, if I get a letter, I got a letter from the IRS, right? And say, we're going to audit you and you owe us $350,000. And I'm like, what? I don't even make that much. What are you talking about? So I was talking to my accountant. I'm like, what the heck is this? And he goes, oh, well, what they do is they look back over 3 years. They take away all your deductions and then give you the bill, and then you have to prove that all these deductions were real. So I
Yeah.
could have been freaking out, going, "Oh my God, I'm going to owe $350,000." Ah, right. But I use my realistic optimism. I say, you know what? I've had an accountant. I've been doing things by the right. This is going to work out, and so that made me feel good. I go, okay, this is going to work out. But and here's the realism part. The realism part, then you go, okay, but I'm going to do everything they asked me to do. I'm going to get all the records. I'm going to use my account. Blah blah blah. In the end, I got a refund of $50,000. And you're like, what? Yeah, because there was some taxes that we didn't write off, some expenses we didn't write off. So in the end, it worked out fine. If I had been worried because it took about a year for this to happen, if I had spent that year freaking out, by the time it got to the conclusion, I actually got some money back. I would have been so burnt out that I wouldn't have been able to enjoy it. But as it was, I was like, yeah, that's what I thought that was going to happen, right? So, but you have to be realistic.
Well, I'm curious for as a primary care physician. So let's say somebody does that, right? I know I have a lot of clients with people who are in prolonged court cases, for example,
Mhm.
and their instinct is to stay at that heightened level. As a primary care physician, what would that ultimately look like? What are some signs and symptoms on the physical body or ways that impacts the physical body so people can have those red flags of like, hey, I'm, not taking care of my mind and it's impacting me here.
Well, there's a great book that I read called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And in that book, he has 300 pages of all the things that happen to you because of stress. So chemically, what happens is your cortisol level and your adrenaline level go way up. And what those do to your body when they're produced chronically and over time are really bad. Like people get ulcers, they get skin rashes, they get asthma. These are the things you go, I can't sleep, or I sleep too much. My appetite's gone, or I'm eating everything in sight. Like I have no energy. Those are the kinds of things that I worry about. Like sometimes it can be as simple as your blood pressure goes up or your sugar's not well controlled. But those are the kinds of things when you start seeing that, like you got all chronic stomach pain, chronic headaches. These are all the things that happen because your adrenaline levels jacked up and your cortisol levels jacked up. they're more prone to getting infected. I mean, literally 300 pages of all the bad things that can happen to you because of that stressful reaction.
So we have to protect this with our life because at the end of the day, our physical health is so deeply tied in with our stress level. I actually think it's really interesting that you listed asthma in there as a result of stress. I didn't realize
Yeah.
that asthma could be a result of stress.
Yeah. Well, because the cortisol affects your immune system, and then the immune system can lead to and having an overreactive lung.
Do you feel like all autoimmune disorders are connected to stress?
I don't know if
On
they're all, but there's been a very high correlation between people who are stressed out and having autoimmune diseases. Yes.
Okay, interesting. So if you're somebody who's listening and you're like, I don't have any energy, I always have a headache, my stomach's always off, I've developed a rash or hives or whatever over the last several years, this is your sign to get Dr. Sprouse's book,
Yes.
which I'll drop in the show notes. But I know we were kind of making a list of having gratitude for the fact that we can envision the future and being able to step back into the moment to make the choice to choose realistic optimism.
There you go.
What
That's
is
the good
what
thing.
is our next on that list of things to do?
Right. So what I said in there earlier was that I want you to be able to continue to have a future, but I don't want you to have to live in fear. So then it comes down to planning, right? So planning without fear. So one of the tools that I developed was what I call a worry organizer. And it's a way to put down in writing what you're worried about, right? And so what I find is that people are waking up at 2 o'clock in the morning, like, oh, I forgot I'm worried. And it's just gone over and over and over and over again because all you have to do is think about it and the fear reaction goes off. So if you write it down, it's a little bit more effort, but once it's done, then it's done. You don't have to do it once. You have to do it over and over and over again. So, but then you have to organize your thinking into, so it's 5 categories. The first is, what am I worried about? So I had a patient who was worried that she was going to get breast cancer. So she came to me and she was freaking out. I'm like, so that's the first category. I'm worried I'm going to get breast cancer. So the second category is, well, why are you worried about that? And she said, well, my sister and my mother both had breast cancer. So I was like, all right, well, that makes sense, right? So the third category is, how likely is that you're going to get breast cancer? And if you got breast cancer, how bad would it be? So in her, what she said to me was, well, there's a 100% chance I'm going to get breast cancer and a 100% chance I'm going to die. Well, once you understood that, then you're like, well, this lady was living with a death sentence. Like, what was the point to live? And she's going to die, right? So that was where I could come in as an expert and say, look, here's the statistics, the real ones. Like, you have a 15% chance of getting breast cancer if you have a family history. And she looked at me like, what do you mean 15%? That's all? I was like, yeah, 15%. I said, and because we're going to catch it early, you got an 85% chance of surviving. And you could see her body language, her whole body posture just changed because she got her life back, right? Then the fourth category
Yeah.
is, well, what can I do to make it not happen, right? So you can do a good diet, reduce your stress, get mammograms, do a BRCA genes, blah, blah, blah. And then the last category is, well, okay, if I got breast cancer, what would I do? And so you can start researching now and say, where's the best cancer institutes? Let me make sure my will's ready. Let me make sure that my sister's going to take care of my kids if something happens to me, right? You can do all these things and plan, but without fear. When you write all that down, then you only have to do it once. And then you can take that piece of paper and show it to your family or show it to your friends or show it to experts and go, hey, anything that you can add to this? Is there enough on this list? But it makes it more efficient. That's the key.
Yeah, I love that because I think it helps people identify misinformation.
Yes,
Because we live with
absolutely.
untruths in our mind at all times that are impacting how we feel, how we experience stress. And when you break it down of like, oh, it goes from a 100% chance of me just dying on the spot to a 15% chance if I did get it, it would be 85% chance that it's viable. And I can plan and prepare to take care of my body to avoid it. And so I think that when we really sit with our thoughts, because some of them are batshit crazy. Like, let's be honest, like some of the things that go through our heads on a daily basis, they're wild, but until we get them out of our body, and this is a practice I love to do with my clients, until we get them somewhere to look at them, we don't really know that they're as crazy as they are. That's one of the things I love about being a therapist is people will say stuff out loud and I'll just repeat it back to them and they'll be like, wait, what? And I'm like, nope, that I literally just said what you said. And they're like,
Yeah.
okay, well, when you put it like that, I'm like, that does sound a little wild. So
Well, one
having
of
the
the things that we
ability
end up is with
to look
social
at it.
media is that we're inundated. Like, this is one of the things that I would love to be able to do. Like we get an article and it screams this headline of 300 people died in a plane crash today. And you're like, there's no balance to that. So it should say, here's 300 people that died. How sad is that? But then right next to it, and just screaming just as loud, 1 million people landed safely today. And then you get some balance. You're like, wow, that's really sad that 300 people died, but 1 million people landed safely? Okay. But we don't get that. All we get is the 300 people died screaming at us all day with these horrible pictures of the plane blowing up. And well, no, so what I realize is we have to add and 1 million people landed safely today.
I think it's really important to look at things from both perspectives. How do you feel like social media as a whole is impacting our mental health and our levels of stress?
Wow, it's an interesting question. So remember, I talked about benefits and side effects, right? So social media is this amazingly powerful tool. Like my wife and I were traveling, and we were in Germany, and we were looking at the Gutenberg press, right? Before the press came out, there weren't that many books out there because people literally had to write it by hand. As that press came out, all of a sudden there were way more books. But I looked up, like 20% of people knew how to read. That meant 80% of people did not. What? I can't even imagine a world where 80% of people can't read.
Mm.
Now, like 100% of people can read, and they got every piece of information that's ever existed in the world on their phone. What? I mean, it's just amazing how incredibly powerful that is, but it has side effects. And that's the problem that we run into. So we're very visual organisms. So, seeing is believing. So before, if I got a newspaper where it wrote an article said, "Hey, there's a war in Iraq and this happened," you're like, "Oh, that's not good." But when I see a bomb going off and people's arms getting blown off, what? Yeah, that's much more visceral. And what you're seeing is that we're getting video from around the world of all the worst things. So there are lots of things that I can think of that can go wrong, but there are people out there that have, like, man, I didn't even think about that. What? Yeah. So now I'm inundated with things I didn't even think about. Gives me one more thing to worry about.
I was on TikTok last night, and obviously the hurricane in Jamaica is
Oh,
just hitting,
right.
and there's people who are kind of documenting being stuck in Jamaica right now,
Yeah.
and what that's looking like, and so I finally had to turn it off. I'm not somebody who naturally seeks out that information. I follow a girl who does yoga retreats,
Yeah.
and she was doing a yoga retreat there. She ended
Oh,
up finding somebody on social media to come get all of her guests via plane, but they only had enough for the guests, so she had to stay
oh,
behind.
uh,
So she was just documenting her experience. But
yeah.
yeah, I think the algorithm, when you have when you sit too long on a video of true crime, for example, or natural disasters or war or politics or whatever it is, when you sit too long on anything in your algorithm, you're fed more of it. And so I think too the state of the world is what it is, but I think when you stay in any emotion, the algorithm also hands you that emotion 20 times over the next 4 days because you've stayed too long in it.
Well, it's not the media's fault, right? The media has learned that if I give you a story that's a nice story, people will watch it. But if I give you a story about disaster, you have to watch it. So there's an imperative. So guess what they give us? Things that are dangerous, things that can make us hurt, make things that can keep us unsafe, because we have to watch that. It's like we have to tell our media, please don't give us this much. We don't need 24/7, everything in the world, everything in the universe, everything in the future. We don't need all that. It's okay.
We talked about the worry organizer, which I love because I think that dissecting your thoughts and then planning for them is so powerful. What comes next?
Well, so when I was writing the book, right, I started out writing all these stresses like worry and guilt and regret and feeling overwhelmed and low self-esteem, and boredom actually turned out to be a big stress. But then when
Mm.
I would say to people, so if you had less stress, where would you be? And they looked at me like, I don't know. I never got that far. I only thought about having less stress, right? And I realized, wait, we need to have a destination. We need a place to get to, because just saying I don't want to have stress doesn't get you any place. You need a place to be. So that's when I started talking about the happy place. And it was a fascinating exploration as I looked into what a happy place meant to people. Every single person had a different idea what a happy place was, right? So like my happy place is at the beach and the waves and the sun and the suntan lotion. my wife thinks the beach is a big kitty litter box. And
Ah,
oh, so this isn't working, right? We got to figure something out here. So here's what I realized, that everybody's happy place has the same rooms, has the same pieces. They just decorate it differently. So everybody has a kitchen, everybody has a dining room, a living room, a bedroom, a bathroom. They just have different decorations. They paint them differently, different furniture, whatever, different sizes, little, big, whatever. So then it came down to like, well, what are the rooms? What rooms are in your happy place? And so then it came to this whole list of like gratitude and pleasure and anticipation of pleasure and hope and having fulfillment and feeling connected and feeling safe and having a spiritual feeling inside, like all these things. And when you go, wait, I can do that, like it's not even that hard, right? So like when you start knowing where you want to be, and that's happy, then you go, oh, I always want to be there. So what I in the book, when it finally came out, I said, look, here's your happy place. So get in there. And then these are the stresses that are keeping you from being in there. And we'll get rid of those. Like let's minimize those so you can spend that much more time in your happy place.
it's really interesting that when you were listing stress, I equate stress a lot to worry, but you said guilt, regret, and boredom as other
Absolutely.
stress stress inducers. Are there any other ones that we're missing that are correlated with stress that people can keep an eye out for? Because I think people don't understand, and maybe even I didn't. I'm doing this for a long time, but I didn't fully understand that stress also equates to
Yeah.
boredom, for
Right.
example.
Yeah. Right. So one of my friends read the book and she came back to me. She goes, oh my God, I didn't realize boredom was so bad. I was like, don't you remember being a 16-year-old riding around the parking lot of a mall trying to hope something would happen because you're just bored out of your head? People do crazy. Here's what I in the book. What I write is, if we have a prisoner who's in jail for the rest of his life and he messes up in jail, his punishment, what do? We put him in solitary confinement, which is what? It's boredom, right? So what I realized about boredom was, it first off, it's bad. Second off, that there's actually three different kinds. So there's one like solitary confinement where there's a lack of stimulation, which literally drives us crazy. I mean, people go nuts when they're in solitary confinement. The second is that when you have a goal to get to and something's getting in the way. So I use an example, like somebody wants to be a nurse, but they have to take an algebra class. And you're like, what? Like, what the heck does algebra have to do with me being a nurse? So they get bored because it's like, this isn't any fun at all. And it's keeping me from getting where I want to be. And the third, which I find is the most common, and you might have had this, I don't know. You came from New York and you went to Charlotte. Maybe not, I don't know. But what I find is when you're used to like a New York City stimulation, and then you move to a southern town, you're like, whoa, like everything is slow. And you're like, ah. And here's what I say, that you're actually in withdrawal. So boredom, actually, one facet of boredom is withdrawal. So if you stay there long enough, eventually you get comfortable with it and that becomes your level. And then when you go back to New York City, you're like, oh my God, this is crazy. What the heck, right? Yeah. And so one of the fastest boredom is just withdrawal. And so you just have to treat it like withdrawal and say, you either just kind of wait it out and get used to it, or go back to New York City, right? Whatever. So here's the one that I found is probably the biggest and the most difficult to deal with, which is low self-esteem. And it's really a difficult problem because they don't pay attention. They don't sit around going, oh, I have low self-esteem, right? It's not something, it starts when you're like 6 months old and you figure out you're different than the people around you. And the information that's coming into you is coming in from your parents and from your siblings and from the TV and maybe from your playmates or whatever. And so it's not until you're 5 that you actually have awareness of what's going on. So for 4.5 years, you're getting information fed. It's in there. You don't even know it's there. So a lot of people start out with a low self-esteem because of the environment that they're in. And then they just never think about it because they stay in that low self-esteem place. And there's a thing in the book that I call the 4Ds, which are ways that we use to keep the information consistent with what we think of ourselves. So if we think of ourselves as not that great a person, and somebody comes along and says, oh, you're really beautiful, you're really smart, I really like what you're doing. And you're like, wait, what? Like, I'm not that good a person. So we do the 4Ds. We're like, oh, they must not know what they're talking about. They have some ulterior motive. I didn't even hear what you just said, right? It just goes over the, and that way, and then what happens? But if somebody comes along and says, yeah, you're a really crappy person, I don't like you, they go, I hate hearing that, but you're right. Yeah, it fits, right? So what happens is if you low self-esteem, you're literally ignoring all the good information and magnifying all the bad information. So guess what? It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's really hard to shake people out of that and say, get some new glasses on and look at things differently. Pay attention to when people are saying you're doing a good thing, and use the 4Ds to say, no, 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 that's not who I am.
I think this is going to be eye-opening for a lot of people because I think we think of stress as our kids, softball schedules or our, or financially, or things that are going on financially, or things that are going on in the world. And I think there's a lot of little pieces of stress in our day to day, like boredom or low self-esteem or regret or guilt that is quietly adding up to produce those crazy cortisol levels we're all experiencing, to produce the feelings that we have on a day-to-day basis. So I know we had started talking about the happy place. How do we get there? Is this someplace we physically go? Is this someplace we go in our mind? What does that look like?
Well, it's both, right? So, we do the stuff like we take a break from the world and go, okay, I'm going to take a weekend off, or I'm going to go travel for a week, and I'm going to go sit at the beach for a week. And you're like, oh, but it's only for a week. What? You're like, that's 51 other weeks that I have to sit around in a stressed out place. So physically we can do stuff, but mentally is probably is easier in the end. It's easier to do it mentally, and you can do that a lot more um, conveniently because I can't take vacation every day, right? But knowing what the happy place is, then it allows you to go, okay, what? So if great gratitude is one of your things, if that's one of the rooms, you got to like, okay, what am I grateful for? So I have this thing I call the 50-point wake up. So I wake up in the morning and I'm still alive, 10 points. Yay. I go into my kitchen and I got water at the sink with a tap that's hot water, cold water, 10 points. Yay. I got food in my refrigerator, another 10 points, right? I got a roof over my head, 40, I'm up to 40 points. And then I go to the bathroom and I have an indoor toilet. What? 50 points. There you go, right there. Just by opening my eyes, right? So then as the rest of the day goes on, if something bad happens, minus 10. But I'm still a plus 40 just by being alive and having food and water, blah, blah, blah. Right. So gratitude, we talk about gratitude a lot, but I don't think we understand how many things are going great for us. Like I was telling this to somebody the other day. I was in Germany on a vacation and we went to this castle. It was beautiful. It was magnificent. It was huge. It had 50 rooms and ornately decorated, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, wow, it would have been nice to be a king of Germany. Then I started looking around like, wait, they didn't have air conditioning. They didn't even have windows. I'm like, wait, what? Then I'm like, they didn't have telephones. They didn't have computers. They didn't have electricity. My little stupid humble abode is better equipped than this castle that the German king lived in. Like, no, we don't get just the whole idea of being able to read. Like, somehow we think that that's a normal thing now. Like, it would be weird for somebody not to know how to read. No, that's not the way the world worked for like thousands of years. Literally, only been in the last 100 years where it became a rule that everybody had to learn how to read. So, gratitude is something that's so easy because all you have to do is open up your eyes and realize what? And sometimes, and this is where travel has come in, where like I've gone to some of these countries where like, you're in the vacation place and it's wonderful and beautiful, right? And then you go out of the compound, and you're like, what? People are living in these shacks with no electricity. And you're like, oh, let me get back to my house and be grateful for all the things that I have.
The basic things that we experience on a day-to-day basis, even down to something as dumb as Amazon, like they have Amazon shipping that's overnight now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, my husband runs a
Yeah.
business where his shipping takes 5 to 7 days like everybody else, but it's just the way, the quickness, the efficiency that we experience on things and having things at our
Crazy.
fingertips is absolutely insane. But how often do we stop to hold gratitude for the fact that my daughter has a tournament coming up this weekend and it's going to be chilly here. So I just
Yeah.
ordered some like electric hand warmers.
Yes. Yeah.
Be
Yeah.
here before then. I don't have to leave my house. I'm going to be comfy cozy all day here. So we do have just these modern conveniences on top of all of our, faculties. I can see, I can hear, I can
The whole world at my fingertips. Yeah. So the other thing I found is that like pleasure is one of these things that we think of pleasurable things like, oh, I got married or I graduated. Like we wait for the big things to really go, oh yay, right? It turned out that our brains were set up to go, 1,000 things a day to give us little jolts of pleasure. So I use this idea of a puzzle, right? So if you're putting together 1,000 piece puzzle, right? Every time you get a piece together, you're like, ooh, like there's a little jolt, like not a big jolt, just a little, like, oh, there's another piece. Oh, there. So you get 999 little jolts of pleasure as you put the puzzle together. And then when you get it together, you get a big jolt. But if you miss all the pleasure you get from the little ones, then you're missing something, right? So our lives have literally thousands of pleasures every day that if we don't pay attention to them, we're missing it. But they add up and they each day they're there. So you don't have to wait for that big pleasure to come along.
I love the point system. I'm gonna start using that. I love the point system because it makes it like a game.
Yeah.
And I think that, we're also training our brain to look for the good things.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
when we're doing that, but we're also like 10 points, so,
Yeah.
negative 10 points, because sometimes there's stuff that goes wrong in our day. But I think that it's like, how far above the original 50 can I get it today? And I think
Yeah.
that like today is the best day ever, and I'm gonna figure out why. Like any of that kind of energy we can put to it, but making it a game is way more interesting. And I think it's more fun and easy to remember than to just be like, look for the good in your day. So I love that. If you could leave us with one last tool for people who are experiencing stress in their life, one that you feel like packs a punch to close down the podcast with, what would it be?
All right. So what I say to people is, look, I know you're stressed out, which then means that you're lacking energy. You just you're overwhelmed. You don't know what to do with yourself. But what I tell people is, do not resign yourself to being stressed out. It doesn't have to be like that. There's ways out, and one of the ways out is you have to be willing to change how you look at the world. If you can change your perspective, something that looks bad can actually be a good thing. And so all you have to do is change the glasses that you got wearing and your perspective will change. And that can make good things out of bad things. And so just don't give up. Keep trying.
I love that. And I'm so grateful for you. Make sure you get Highway to Your Happy Place by Dr. Gary Sprouse. I will drop a link and all the ways you can connect with him in your show notes. Thank you so much for being here. This was so much fun.
Thank you so much for having me. And I hope we helped at least one person today.
I have a good feeling about it. I really do. Catch you guys next week.